With me today is Elizabeth Eckermann, a preeminent well-being researcher. Dr. Eckermann, can you tell us your current title and affiliation, please?
I'm a professor with a personal chair at Deakin University in Australia. It's a university in Victoria in Australia, which started the Australian Centre for Quality of Life Studies. So we've been around for a long time addressing these kinds of issues, both Bob Cummins, who's also from Deakin, and myself.
Very good. Well, can you tell us what you feel like your main contributions to the field of well-being have been?
Well, I guess my key role within the International Society for Quality of Life Studies, where I've been director and also been on the board for many, many years, has been to address the issue of women and gender and quality of life issues, because the history of quality of life has not been very gendered, and so I guess the society was very interested in introducing gender issues. So I guess I've been responsible for that, and particularly looking at disadvantaged women, women who are neither literate nor numerate, developing tools for measuring quality of life amongst women who are not able to express it using the usual forms of quality of life measurement.
Very good. Can you tell us about some of the projects or populations you've studied?
Yeah. The most recent work that I've been doing is in Malaysia, actually, where I'm applying a tool that I developed as part of an Australian aid organisation. The Australian Aid Agency actually funded me to develop a tool called the Diamond Wellbeing Tool, or an adaptation of an existing Diamond Wellbeing Tool, but it's adapted so it's both quantitative and qualitative in terms of measurement of quality of life. So I developed that in Laos PDR, but I'm now applying it in Malaysia to look at how to evaluate the impact of alcohol abuse prevention programs in Malaysia. And it's being applied for both men and women, but it was originally devised in Laos to look at interventions involving women who were pregnant and women who had just had children in Laos, who were using a maternity waiting home program, and evaluating whether that had any impact on their quality of life. So it was before and after evaluation of the impact.
And what did you find?
We found that, yes, there was a significant impact. I mean, it was quite dramatic. But the other thing that we found was a whole lot of serendipitous findings that we didn't expect. Mm-hmm. And so that was the most exciting part of it, was finding all of these side issues that we hadn't even anticipated in the research. So that's the most exciting part of research, is the surprises that you get.
Yes, that's a big part of science, the history of science.
Yeah, and some of those surprises weren't all that happy surprises, because we discovered very high rates of domestic violence, which we hadn't anticipated. So obviously that had a dramatic effect. So it was an interesting exercise, because this allowed, many of the women said it was the first time they'd actually verbalised some of these issues. So we made sure that those people who would normally curtail their discussions, we made sure they were out of reach, or out of sound reach at least, so that we did. I think we got some very honest and very interesting, as I said, quite serendipitous kind of findings out of that research.
And for those who may confuse Laos with Laos, the country of Laos, can you tell us where it is?
Well, Laos, I refer to it as Laos because it's officially called Laos PDR, Laos People's Democratic Republic, but it's often referred to as Laos, Laos.
Okay, so it is the same
country.
The country Southeast Asian country.
The country that was bombed during the the Vietnam War, the country that was tried to be neutral but never quite succeeded because at one stage the population was overrun by Americans, and another stage they were overrun by Vietnamese, so they were caught in the middle there. So there have been some huge problems ever since, but since that war, Laos certainly opened out. It wasn't open before. It was very hard to get into the country. I remember the first time I went there, which was probably in about, must have been about 1972, and it was certainly closed off at that stage. It was very hard to get into the country. But now it's quite accessible. There are bridges across the Mekong, and there are various ways of getting in there, which are, and it's a very accessible country.
Can you tell me, are there any other major contributions that you feel you've made to the field of well-being that you'd like to highlight?
I guess what I've tried to do is to develop indicators that more accurately reflect people's lived experience. So it's easy to find objective indicators of education levels, mortality, morbidity, those kinds of things. But baseline data on how people respond and whether they're happy, they may live a longer life, but is it a necessarily a happier life? And so mortality data has been so dominant in the field to reflect progress. But I think that developing more subjective indicators has been able to, we've been able to unpick that impact on their people's lives and look at beyond just quantity of life, but also quality of life.
So going back to Seneca's quote about it matters with play as with life, not how long it is, but how good it is.
That's right.
Can you give us an example of some questions or metrics that you've developed that you're proud of and you think capture some of that?
Well, I guess the diamond tool is probably, I think, the most significant change, because these women's voices were not reflected, because they would be faced with a N-defined scale, an 11-point N-defined scale, and not know what on earth to do with it. And we tried it with women. We tried the personal wellbeing index, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. They would hand it around and ask other people what they thought, and those kinds of things. So it didn't actually reflect in any way what the women were really feeling. So having a diagrammatic representation of their lives and then placing themselves within a space without any numbers attached or without any words attached was in fact quite liberating for them, because they felt they could do that, and they enjoyed it. Every single woman that we interviewed said they enjoyed it. Some of them cried because they were talking about things that were not very pleasant, and in Laos the death of babies is commonplace. In fact, they don't even name their babies until they're 12 months old. They give them a nickname for the first 12 months in case they die, and if they die before the 12 months, then if they've already got a name, then it's quite expensive to have a funeral ceremony and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a reflection on the reality of life, which is pretty harsh and brutal in the life that they live. Very high rates of maternal mortality still, and very high rates of infant mortality. And as I said, some quite disturbing findings in relation to domestic violence as well. Yes.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful contribution where you're adapting metrics to Indigenous people, and you're looking at the quality of life of women, which it sounds like has been neglected in the past.
Yes, definitely.
And are there any other findings or research projects you want to highlight that you're?
Well, I guess the work that we're doing in Malaysia at the moment. I'm also preparing a book on. It's called Love, Life and Death on the Kinabatangan, which is the Kinabatangan River, which is a river on the eastern side of Borneo. There are communities there who are neglected. There's the Orang Sungai community who have never been studied. Everyone's very interested in the wildlife there, on the orangutans and the elephants and the monkeys and all of that kind of stuff. But the actual life of the people who live there is...
The human beings
have been neglected. So they've been I guess they've been to some degree a victim of that kind of glorification of environment and ignoring that humans are actually part of that environment.
Yeah.
So, and also on that side of Borneo, there are a lot of illegal immigrants who don't get education and who don't get health care because they're illegal and they can't seek anything from the government.
Where do they come from?
They've come from Timor, from Sulawesi, from the Philippines, from all of the areas around Borneo, and the government kind of tolerates them there, but it doesn't provide any services for them. So the kids can't go to school, nobody can get any health care. So I'm particularly interested in trying to get some kind of attention to those people, and I'm working with somebody from the University of Malaysia, Sabah, at the moment, in the medical faculty, who will be sending teams of dentists and doctors out to those areas to attend to the dental health and the mental health and the physical health of particularly the children in the area who are not getting any care at all. So that's another passion of mine. And
have you so you visited this area? Have you studied it more formally? Are you going to do more research for the book? Or
I'm honing my language skills because Malay was my first language because I was brought up in Malaysia, in Borneo. But I've forgotten a lot, and so I'm trying to hone up my language skills. I've been back 5 times now to the Kinabatangan to start looking at what sort of areas we're going to focus on, and it'll be basically on the quality of life of the people living along that along the Kinabatangan and the particular issues that face them, and we're hoping to actually, and I'm working with an artist as well who's producing. He's doing the photographs and also some of the illustrations to support the text, and we're hoping to produce an accessible book as well as an academic book.
Very good. It sounds very ambitious, and it's a very underserved, understudied population. It sounds like.
Yes, and nobody seems to have done any work on the area, and that surprises me because there is so much need in that area. Yeah.
So. Any other practical implications of your work that you'd like to share? And results.
Well, AusAid, the Australian aid organisation, has given us now permission to use the tool, the diamond tool that we developed. In any context we want to use it, so we think it's got potential to be used as a tool. I mean, ideally, we would like to see a situation where everyone is literate and numerate and can use numbers and use words in an appropriate and in a way that empowers them. But the reality is that there is a large proportion of the people within this region, within the Pacific region, who are still not literate and still not adequately literate and numerate. So in the meantime, I guess there needs to be some way of recording what their experiences of quality of life are.
And in terms of the quality of life of women, what are your general impressions there, or specific comments?
It's an interesting area, isn't it? Because men die younger than women, but women have more illness. So it's a classic case of a long life doesn't necessarily lead to a happy or a satisfying life. So yes. So on the mortality dimension, males are behind the 8 ball. On morbidity and on quality of life, women seem to be, but. I've just published a book on gender and lifespan and looking at international perspectives and quality of life. And it seems there's very, very varying data about the gender dimensions of quality of life across the globe. And we've got 16 countries in the book and very, very varying kind of outcomes in terms of whether men or women are happier, or men or women experience a better quality of life. So yes, it's certainly in some of the old Soviet Union countries, men are in a bad shape, in a very bad shape, and
relative to women as well.
Relative to women, yes. Certainly their life expectancy is going down. In sub-Saharan Africa as well, there's a substantial decline in life expectancy, especially amongst males, because of HIV and civil strife and various other forms of compromise, I guess, to life experiences. So, yes, I think the whole issue about gender really needs to be explored a lot more. It's all very well to be able to gender disaggregate data, but we also need to gender analyse that data. So we can sex disaggregate the data and say, yeah, this is the situation for men and this is the situation for women. But then the hard work is analysing that, doing the gender analysis that actually says, well, what does this really mean? And how does that fit into the broader kind of macro picture of the way that life is organised in these particular communities? And we even have that situation in Australia, which purports to be a first world country, but we have Aboriginal populations where maternal mortality, infant mortality, life expectancies are still very, very low. Levels of domestic violence are very high, and on many indicators of well-being fare very badly. So I guess the lesson from all of that is that we need to disaggregate data not only by gender but also by cultural experience and by grouping. Yeah, various other forms of grouping. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for ways to keep the field vital and growing? And
well, I think it's very, very important that for, say, the International Society for Quality of Life Studies, that we continue to try and recruit younger people, because a lot of us are getting on, and I think it's about time we started handing on the baton. And I think handing on the baton is a very important part, and I see this forum as one of those kinds of forums where the baton is being handed on, and it's just really fantastic to see so many young people developing an interest in this area, and hopefully there'll be some of that passageway of passing on information and passing on projects, I guess, and there's no reason why us old codgers can't actually help in that process. But it would be nice if we could just step back a little bit and let the next generation take over.
Well, thank you so much for your contribution and for your time today.
Thank you very much, Michael.